We are all living stories unfolding in real time, narratives written by the hands of experience, circumstance, and choice. Yet, if we are being honest with ourselves, most of us spend a great deal of our time fighting against the flow of life. We struggle against the inevitable currents of change, trying to control the uncontrollable, to manage what can never truly be managed. In this battle, we often forget that life itself is a river, flowing with its own rhythm, moving in ways we cannot always comprehend, and yet always moving forward. To resist the river is to tire ourselves against an unstoppable force. To surrender to it is to finally trust that the flow will lead us to where we need to be. Imagine for a moment what it would be like to surrender completely to the flow of life, not in the sense of giving up or resigning ourselves to fate, but in the sense of releasing the struggle, letting go of the tight grip of control, and allowing ourselves to float along, trusting that the river knows its course. What if we stopped fighting, stopped struggling against each twist and turn, stopped questioning every ripple in the current? How much more peaceful could our lives be if we allowed the wisdom of surrender to guide us? Surrender does not mean giving up. It means letting go of resistance. Resistance is what creates stress, anxiety, and dissatisfaction in our lives. When we resist what is happening, we are fighting against the present moment, against reality as it is. But the present moment is all we truly have, and when we resist it, we create an inner conflict. We fight against what is instead of embracing it. This internal struggle drains our energy, creates mental chaos, and keeps us trapped in cycles of dissatisfaction. The wisdom of surrender teaches us to let go of this fight, to release our attachment to outcomes, and to trust that life is unfolding in a way that serves our highest good, even if we cannot yet see the bigger picture. The concept of surrender is not new. It is a theme that runs through every spiritual tradition, from the teachings of the Buddha to the wisdom of the Taoists to the surrender of self in the Christian tradition. The wisdom of surrender speaks of yielding, not out of weakness, but out of strength. It speaks of letting go, not because we are incapable, but because we trust in something greater than ourselves. It is a deep and powerful act of faith, of recognizing that we are not the masters of life, but participants in a greater unfolding. The more we allow ourselves to be carried by the current, the more we discover that the river is guiding us precisely where we need to go. To surrender is to accept the flow of life, even when it takes us places we may not expect or understand. It is not always easy, especially when we face challenges, hardships, or loss. There are moments when the current feels too strong, when the waters seem dark and turbulent, and we may feel that we are drowning. But it is in these very moments that the wisdom of surrender is most powerful. It teaches us that even in the hardest of times, we are being carried. Even when we cannot see the shore, the river knows its way. And by surrendering to the flow, we allow ourselves to be supported by something far greater than our individual willpower. When we surrender to life, We stop trying to force things to happen. We stop trying to control every detail, every outcome, and we allow the universe to unfold as it will. We trust that whatever comes is for our growth, for our learning, and for our highest good. We stop swimming against the current, stop paddling with all our might to get to a destination we think we want, and instead, we float. We rest in the knowledge that we are exactly where we need to be. And when we do this, something miraculous happens. We find peace. This peace comes from a deep knowing that we are not alone in the river. Life is not a solitary journey, but a shared experience. When we surrender, we stop trying to control others, stop needing to force them to see things our way, and instead, we allow them to follow their own currents. We stop judging, stop expecting, and stop demanding. We begin to trust that everyone is on their own path, and that by surrendering to the flow of life, we allow ourselves and others to grow at their own pace, in their own way. Surrender does not mean passivity. It does not mean sitting idly by, waiting for life to happen to us. It means engaging with life fully, but without the weight of expectation or attachment. It means participating in life with an open heart, fully present in each moment, without clinging to the past or fearing the future. It means acting with intention, but without attachment to the outcome. When we surrender, we are free from the burden of trying to make things happen. We simply do our best in each moment, knowing that whatever comes is exactly what we need. And when we release our grip on outcomes, we often find that life flows more effortlessly, more gracefully, and more harmoniously. The wisdom of surrender invites us to let go of our need to be in control, to embrace the mystery of life, and to trust that we are being guided towards something greater. It invites us to stop fighting against the current and instead to trust the river. For it is only in surrender that we find true peace, true freedom, and true joy. As we surrender, we learn to be fully present in the here and now. We stop rushing through life, always looking ahead to what is next, and instead, we begin to appreciate the beauty of the moment. We realize that the present moment is the only one we ever truly have, and that by surrendering to it, we can experience a deep sense of peace, a deep sense of connectedness with everything around us. In surrender, we find a deep and lasting peace that transcends the struggles of the mind, a peace that comes from knowing that we are exactly where we are meant to be. When we surrender, we also begin to experience greater joy. Joy is not something that comes from external circumstances, but from within. It is not dependent on achieving goals, obtaining material possessions, or getting what we want. True joy comes from the freedom of letting go, from the release of attachment, and from the deep sense of peace that arises when we stop fighting life and start flowing with it. Joy is found in the simple act of being, of allowing ourselves to be fully present in each moment, without the burden of expectation or judgment. To surrender is to open ourselves to the flow of love, to the energy of the universe, and to the infinite possibilities that exist in each moment. When we surrender, we are no longer bound by our limitations, no longer trapped in the small, constricted world of our ego. We open ourselves to something far greater, far more expansive, and far more beautiful. We become a part of the greater whole, moving with the rhythm of life, connected to everything around us. As we continue to surrender, we begin to see life in a new light. We stop seeing ourselves as separate from the world, and instead, we begin to recognize our connection to all things. We begin to understand that life is not something happening to us, but something that we are a part of, something that flows through us and with us. We are not separate from the river. We are the river, moving, changing, and growing. We are not separate from the universe. We are the universe, expressing itself in infinite ways. And when we surrender to this truth, we experience a deep sense of unity, a deep sense of belonging, and a deep sense of peace. Surrender is not about weakness, but about strength. It is not about giving up, but about letting go of the need to control. It is about trusting in life, trusting in the universe, and trusting in ourselves. It is about recognizing that we are part of something far greater, and that when we let go of our resistance, we open ourselves to the infinite possibilities that life has to offer. When we surrender, we are free. We are free from fear, free from control, free from the need to prove ourselves. We are free to be who we truly are, to experience life as it is, and to flow with the river of existence. In the end, the wisdom of surrender teaches us that we are not meant to fight life. We are meant to flow with it. When we surrender to the current, we stop struggling and start living. We stop fighting and start flowing. And in that flow, we find peace, we find joy, we find love, and we find the true freedom that comes from letting go. So, let go of the struggle, surrender to the flow, and trust that life will carry you exactly where you need to go. As we continue down the path of surrender, we come to understand that there are no accidents in life. Everything that happens, every person we meet, every situation we encounter is part of a greater design, a perfect unfolding that is beyond our comprehension. To surrender is to acknowledge this design, to trust that life is not arbitrary or random, but deeply purposeful. Even when we cannot see the purpose of a particular moment, or when we face challenges that seem unfair or unjust, we must remember that the universe does not make mistakes. Every twist and turn, every moment of joy and every moment of sorrow is woven into the fabric of our existence for a reason, for a greater good. But here's the catch. We cannot always understand the reasons in the moment. We cannot always know why certain things happen the way they do. In fact, there will be times when we feel utterly lost, as though we are adrift in an ocean with no shore in sight. This is where the wisdom of surrender becomes most important. In those moments, when we are unsure and uncertain, surrender teaches us to trust, not in the things we can see or touch, but in the unseen forces that guide our lives. It teaches us to trust in the wisdom of life itself and to know that there is a greater plan in motion, even if we cannot yet comprehend it. There is a profound peace that comes from surrendering to the unknown. The unknown is often a source of fear for many of us. We fear what we cannot control, what we cannot predict. But what if, instead of fearing the unknown, we embraced it? What if we saw the unknown not as a threat, but as a vast open space full of possibilities? Surrender is not about having all the answers. It is not about being perfect or knowing exactly what to do at every moment. It is about releasing the need to control every aspect of our lives and instead allowing ourselves to be guided by a higher wisdom. This wisdom comes from a place deep within us, a place that knows what is best for us, even when our minds may tell us otherwise. When we surrender, we begin to listen to that inner voice, to the whispers of the soul rather than the noise of the mind. In the silence of surrender, we learn to listen more deeply to the world around us, to the people in our lives, and most importantly, to ourselves. We begin to hear the subtle messages that life is constantly sending us, messages that we often miss when we are too busy trying to control and direct everything. These messages are not always loud or obvious. Sometimes they come as a quiet intuition, a gentle nudge in a certain direction, or an unexpected opportunity. But when we surrender, we become more attuned to these signs, more able to recognize the subtle guidance that life offers. One of the most powerful aspects of surrender is that it allows us to release our attachment to the past and the future. So often, we are trapped by the stories of our past, by the regrets, the mistakes, and the missed opportunities. We dwell on what could have been, what should have been, and we hold on to these old narratives as though they define us. But surrender teaches us that the past is just that, the past. It is gone, and we cannot change it. What we can change is our relationship with it. Instead of holding on to old wounds, old disappointments, and old fears, we can release them. We can surrender to the fact that the past is over and that we are free to create a new story, a new narrative. Surrender also allows us to release our attachment to the future. We often spend so much time worrying about what is coming next, about what we need to do, what we need to achieve, that we lose sight of the present moment. We live in a constant state of anticipation, always waiting for something to happen, always striving for the next goal, the next achievement. But the future is not something we can control, no matter how hard we try. The only moment we have is the present moment, and it is in the present moment that we can truly live. Surrendering to the present allows us to stop living in a state of perpetual anticipation and instead embrace the beauty and richness of the now. By surrendering to the present, we also become more present for others. When we stop worrying about the future and stop ruminating on the past, we can truly be with the people in our lives. We can listen to them more deeply, love them more fully, and support them more genuinely. Surrendering to life's flow is not a solitary act. It is something we do in connection with others, in the shared experience of being human. When we surrender, we create space for others to surrender as well. We stop trying to control them, stop trying to change them, and instead, we allow them to be exactly who they are. We accept them without judgment, without expectation, and in doing so, we allow them to be free. And it is in this freedom that we find true connection. True connection with others comes not from trying to fix them or change them, but from accepting them as they are. When we surrender to life's flow, we also surrender to the flow of our relationships. We allow them to evolve naturally, without trying to force them into a mold or an ideal. We stop trying to control the people around us, and instead, we give them the freedom to grow and change in their own way, just as we are doing for ourselves. Surrender also opens us up to the flow of love. Love is not something that can be controlled or manipulated. It is a force that flows freely when we allow it to. When we surrender to love, we stop trying to possess it, stop trying to make it fit into a box or meet our expectations. We allow it to flow freely as it was always meant to. Love, like life, is meant to flow, to expand, to grow. And when we surrender to that flow, we experience the fullness of love in all its forms. Romantic love, familial love, love for friends, love for ourselves, and love for all of creation. In the wisdom of surrender, we learn to let go of fear. Fear is one of the greatest obstacles to surrender. We fear the unknown, we fear loss, we fear change. But fear is a product of the mind, a projection of the ego. When we surrender, we stop listening to the fearful voice of the mind and instead listen to the calm, steady voice of the heart. The heart knows that there is nothing to fear. The heart knows that we are supported, that we are loved, and that we are safe in the flow of life. When we surrender to the wisdom of the heart, we step into a place of power, a place of peace, and a place of true freedom. As we continue to surrender, we begin to experience a deep sense of gratitude. Gratitude is a natural byproduct of surrender. When we let go of our need to control, we begin to appreciate all that we have, all that we are, and all that life is offering us. Gratitude shifts our focus from what is lacking to what is abundant. It opens our hearts to the beauty of life, even in the most difficult moments. Gratitude is the language of surrender, the acknowledgement that everything we need is already here, and that life is always providing for us in ways both big and small. Surrendering to life's flow is a practice, not a one-time event. It is something we must cultivate every day, in every moment. It requires awareness, patience, and trust. But the more we practice it, the easier it becomes. The more we surrender, the more we find that life flows with grace, with ease, and with love. We find that we no longer need to struggle, no longer need to fight against the current. Instead, we simply allow ourselves to flow, knowing that the river is taking us exactly where we need to go. In the end, the wisdom of surrender teaches us that life is not something to be controlled, but something to be experienced. It is not something to be feared, but something to be embraced. And when we surrender, we step into the full embrace of life with all its beauty, all its mystery, and all its infinite possibilities. We stop fighting and we start living. We stop resisting and we start flowing. And in that flow, we find peace, we find joy, we find love, we find freedom. So, let go, surrender, trust the flow of life, and know that you are exactly where you're meant to be. Everything is unfolding perfectly, even if you cannot see it yet. Trust in the journey, trust in the river, and most of all, trust in yourself. For in the wisdom of surrender, you will find everything you have been seeking and so much more.